morning, everyone. This is Ben Weisner, your host for today's webinar. Thank you for joining us this morning for 5 essential components of a multi-tiered system of supports for reading, presented by Corey Stye, Read Naturally's Associate Director of Curriculum. Corey applies 20 years of educational experience to support educators, leaders, and policymakers with literacy, continuous improvement, and standards-based education. He has taught ELA and reading to K-12 students, graduate courses in literacy to pre-service educators, served as a state reading specialist, and provided leadership and development for nonprofit programs and professional organizations. Corey's presentation today will not include real-time Q&A, but please submit your questions using the questions tool in your meeting panel, and we'll get back to you as soon as possible after the presentation has concluded. You should have all received links to the handouts for today's meeting and the meeting reminder emails. The handouts are also available from the meeting panel if you'd like to download and print them out now. Many of you have also asked about a recording of this webinar. We'll be sending out follow-up emails with links to the recording in about 24 hours, so please look for that in your inbox. Feel free to share the recording with anyone at your school or district who you think would benefit from this very valuable information. And finally, if you're having technical difficulties, please contact GoToWebinar support. Their phone number is listed at the bottom of the meeting panel. And now, without further delay, I'm going to pass the microphone off to Corey Stye, your presenter for today's Read Naturally webinar.
Thank you, Ben. Hello, and welcome to this presentation of the 5 essential components of a multi-tiered system of supports for reading. Over the next 30 minutes, we will explore 2 broad topics together. First, we will develop a shared understanding of MTSS. We'll explore its purpose, benefits for educators and learners, and 5 essential components. Next, we'll explore the Read Naturally programs appropriate for Tier 2 or Tier 3 intervention and the many ways they incorporate and support the components of MTSS. Because education loves its abbreviations and acronyms, let's begin by sorting out some of the alphabet soup. The abbreviation MTSS stands for Multi-Tiered System of Supports. Multi-tiered system of supports is an umbrella term that refers to any support system that incorporates its core components. There are a couple of MTSS frameworks with which you may already be familiar. For example, PBIS, or Positive Behavioral Interventions and Supports, is a school-wide MTSS framework designed to address or promote learners' behavior through prevention and support. PBIS is well-defined and represents one brand of MTSS, if you will. Another brand of MTSS you may have heard of is RTI, or Response to Intervention. RTI is a multi-tiered system of supports which attends to students' standards-based academic needs. MTSS is a system-wide effort to meet the needs of every child. An education system may choose to develop an MTSS framework to address a variety of areas. As we've seen, it may address academics, like an RTI, behavior, as does PBIS. Another area sometimes addressed using an MTSS framework may be health, from universal vision screening to more severe needs requiring accommodations, accessibility improvements, or assistive technologies. While you may develop a separate MTSS structure for each of these focus areas, many organizations today are moving toward a single integrated system of supports that addresses all these areas or more. As we all know, an individual's poor behavior is sometimes the result of unmet academic needs and frustrations. Likewise, a student can't concentrate at school when she is hungry or is getting headaches due to uncorrected vision or visual disorders, and unaddressed social emotional needs might adversely affect a learner's academic success. These areas are all interrelated. MTSS provides many benefits to students and educators. First, it proactively identifies students needing support. Through intentional screening and monitoring, educators work to ensure that no student falls through the cracks. It is an alternative to the wait-to-fail model seen in many education systems. MTSS is designed to catch students early, before their needs manifest in ways that put them behind peers, damage their motivation, or lead to poor or unproductive self-concepts, such as poor self-confidence, self-efficacy, or self-esteem. As a system-wide approach to education, MTSS promotes collaboration among staff, fostering shared responsibility for student performance, and facilitating sharing of information and resources. MTSS is managed by one or more teams of educators, leaders, and specialists who are responsible for overseeing and implementing the system. Their primary purpose is to leverage the staff and resources across the system to address identified student needs. Another benefit of MTSS is to combat inequity. In some systems, a learner's experience is dependent upon whose classroom he or she happens to be assigned. By having well-established procedures, data collection and analysis, and decisional guidance, organizations can ensure that all students will be provided the instruction, support, and educational opportunities they need, regardless of which school or classroom they're in. Beyond the opportunities afforded to individual students, the systematic analysis of all students' performance within MTSS can reveal systematic racism, sexism, or other opportunity gaps that lead different student groups to experience the system differently. This allows educators to identify root causes and adjust the system to combat otherwise hidden inequities. Finally, MTSS empowers educators with data and decision support to act with confidence, to experience the satisfaction that comes with success for each learner, and to be supported by colleagues and leaders in the collective mission and responsibility of providing a high-quality education to all learners. Now that we understand the varying types and brands of MTSS and the benefits of MTSS frameworks, let's explore the core components that make up a multi-tiered system of supports. While you'll find MTSS presented with a varying number of components, I'm going to discuss 5 commonly accepted features that are critical to any MTSS implementation. This first component of a successful MTSS is an established infrastructure. That includes dedicated leadership, a culture of collaboration, and an infrastructure for building the capacity of all individuals contributing to the system. As a system-wide framework, MTSS relies on one or more teams of educators working together to manage and apply the system to meet learners' needs. Many MTSS articulations don't explicitly include this feature, but these elements are critical to any successful system, and this is especially true when implementing an integrated system of supports. The second critical component of MTSS is universal screening. While much of the discussion of MTSS focuses on the interventions, MTSS is for everyone, and this begins with screening all learners. Screening assessments, unlike diagnostic or formative assessments, are designed as a checkup for all learners to ensure they are performing on grade level. Guidance is often provided to determine if learners are at low risk, some risk, or high risk of being behind peers at the end of the school year. By screening all learners on a regular basis, systems can ensure that learners who were on grade level have not slowed in their progress, fallen behind, or do not perform differently on increasingly complex and rigorous tasks. The next feature of MTSS is a tiered system of intensified prevention, support, and intervention. We're going to talk quite a bit more about that in a moment. In MTSS, supports are determined, implemented, and monitored using a clear problem-solving process. MTSS teams use information gathered through decision-driven data collection to assign interventions and supports to meet each learner's needs. Finally, once an intervention has begun, MTSS defines timelines and processes for monitoring the impacts of supports on desired outcomes and to adjust as needed. So let's look more closely at each of these critical features. Establishing MTSS within an organization or building could easily be its own day-long seminar. We're going to spend the rest of our time today primarily talking about the last 3 critical features of MTSS: tiers, problem solving, and progress monitoring. However, if you don't currently have MTSS within your organization, you may want to explore these resources to get started. For information on an academic-focused system, you might access resources from the Center on Response to Intervention. This federally funded effort is currently run by the American Institutes of Research. For information on a behavior-focused system, the U.S. Department of Education's Office of Special Education Programs runs the Technical Assistance Center on Positive Behavioral Interventions and Supports. The websites for both centers are found on the slide. On a side note, while I've mentioned special education, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that MTSS is a method available for school systems to use for qualifying students for special education services instead of a discrepancy model. While MTSS within special education is its own separate, lengthy, and complicated discussion, understand that regardless of whether an MTSS framework is used as part of your referral and identification procedures or not, the components discussed today are the same. If used for referral, however, some of the specifics of problem solving and decision making will be affected by federal and state requirements. If you have questions on this for your system, I encourage you to reach out to your district's Director of Special Education. Another topic that could be a session all to itself is universal screening. For this introduction, I'll simply leave you with one resource. The National Center on Intensive Intervention, also run by AIR, have both an academic screening tools chart and a behavior screening tools chart that you may find useful for either establishing a new system of screening and progress monitoring or to evaluate the tools you currently use for reading or mathematics. These consumer report style charts provide evaluation of the classification accuracy, technical standards, and usability features of screeners and progress monitoring tools appropriate for MTSS. Now, let's explore what it means to have a multi-tiered system. This slide presents the most common visual associated with MTSS, the MTSS pyramid or triangle. Most MTSS models present a three-tiered system. However, you will encounter a variety of terms used to label these tiers. While many systems refer to these tiers simply as tiers 1, 2, and 3, you may know them by different names, such as universal, supplemental, and tertiary, or core, targeted, and intensive, or some other combination of these terms. You will likely want to become familiar with the sets of terms for each tier, as they're used interchangeably in MTSS literature. So take notice of the labels on the two visible sides of the pyramid and the text to its right as we explore each tier. Let's start with the foundation, variably called Universal, Core, or Tier 1 instruction. This is the foundation because it is the instruction provided to all students. If a core curriculum is not meeting the needs of at least 80% of the students receiving it, it's an indication that improvements need to be made to the classroom practices and aligned materials being used. School systems will never have the resources necessary to intervene its way out of poor classroom instruction. This number can be misleading, so I want to be clear. Tier 1 is not provided to only 80% of students. 80% is a threshold target that adults should strive toward for their classroom instruction. At least 80% of students able to be successful receiving only Tier 1 instruction without the need for supplemental Tier 2 or 3 intervention. Supplemental, targeted, or Tier 2 intervention provides additional supports for some students. If Tier 1 instruction is effective for its target of 80% or more of students, then you might expect about 5 to 15% of students to need Tier 2 supports. Finally, some learners will need even more intensive or prolonged support. Intensive, tertiary, or Tier 3 intervention is usually provided one-on-one to a few students in the organization, usually less than 5%. Note that while the term intervention typically refers to Tiers 2 and 3, prevention and support starts in the classroom with Tier 1. Universally designed curriculum, intentional differentiation, multiple opportunities and modes of demonstrating student proficiency, and curricular supports or instructional scaffolds need to be in place if an MTSS is to ever hope to meet the needs of all learners. While the triangle or pyramid are nearly universally used to represent MTSS, it can leave an impression that students are moved from one tier of instruction to the next and back. In fact, MTSS supports are better presented as layers, as seen here. This is because interventions are intended to be in addition to Tier 1 instruction, not as a replacement for that instruction. This is sometimes referred to as a double dose, or to supplement, not supplant. Specifically, Tier 2 or 3 intervention provides additional time, additional supports, or more targeted instruction tailored to a learner's need than Tier 1 instruction can provide on its own. The system of support is also not just about remediation. An MTSS for academics, for example, should also incorporate processes and outcomes for gifted and talented students who may need acceleration or extension to Tier 1 instruction. Remember, MTSS is about all learners, identifying their needs, doing something to meet them, and monitoring the impact over time. Educator teams manage MTSS through a problem-solving cycle. Beginning with universal screening and applying secondary screening and diagnostic testing, the problem-solving team begins by defining any areas of need requiring attention. Once identified, the team analyzes instructional practices, materials, and interventions to determine a course of action to respond to the identified need. This may include changes to curriculum or instructional practices, implementation of a class-wide intervention, or assignment of Tier 2 or Tier 3 small group or individualized interventions. Then, the responsible adults implement the intervention as intended. And finally, using progress monitoring, individuals or teams determine if the intervention is having the desired results and that the progress is sufficient to close the gap between current and grade level performance. If the response to intervention, as it were, is not adequate, adjustments need to be made. This process continues until individual learners are back on track and until the next universal screening is conducted and analyzed for all students. This slide provides some of the key questions that teams answer while monitoring response to intervention. Generally, the adults need to know that learners are making positive progress toward the desired outcomes and that the growth trend is sufficient to close the gap. Remember, in order to close the gap, learners who are behind must be making greater growth than on-grade level peers. A second area of consideration is the adequacy of the supports being provided. Does the learner need additional supports to achieve success? Or is the learner showing progress that warrants the removal of temporary supports toward greater independence? This is especially needed to ensure ongoing success when being exited from a program or intervention, which is the final area that teams must monitor and address. Generally, the more intensive the supports, the more frequently you will monitor its impact. Let's pause before we move on to explore reading interventions for multi-tiered systems of support. Take a moment to see if you can answer these questions. We'll review the answers in about 60 seconds. Let's review the answers to these questions. First, MTSS, RTI, and PBIS are similar in that they utilize the same essential components. The difference is that RTI addresses academics, whereas PBIS addresses behavior, while MTSS is an umbrella term that covers all systems using this framework. Second question, there are typically 3 tiers in most systems, and you may have identified any of the below as labels for each tier. Finally, MTSS is designed to support all learners. All students are screened, and supports may address many areas, from health to behavior to academics, and address issues across the developmental continuum, from remediation through acceleration. Ideally, less than 20% of students will need supplemental support beyond Tier 1. At this time, I'd like to take just a couple of minutes to share a little about the Read Naturally programs available for use within an MTSS for reading. As many of you know, most Read Naturally programs are based on the Read Naturally strategy. This framework combines 3 evidence-based instructional practices: teacher modeling, repeated reading, and progress monitoring, and is the core of our research-based reading intervention programs. In Read Naturally strategy-based programs, learners read along with audio recordings which provide models of proficient reading. Then they practice reading the words or stories with aid of built-in supports. Finally, all programs utilize data to assist students and educators to monitor their progress over time and make adjustments to ensure students are always working at their optimum level of challenge for success. We'll look more closely at that data in just a moment. The booklet, Read Naturally Strategy, Rationale, and Research Brief, describes how these practices work to accelerate student learning and provides a freshly updated bibliography reflecting the most current research into these evidence-based practices. You will also find this information in the Teacher's Manual for Encore 2, the print-based version of our Fluency Intervention program. The last couple decades have replicated previous findings and produced new research to reaffirm these instructional practices. As one recent review of research stated, findings suggest that repeated reading remains the most effective intervention for improving reading fluency for students. In addition, available on our website is a research review conducted by Dr. Danielle Dupuis of the Center for Applied Research and Educational Improvement. Using ESSA language itself and the additional non-regulatory guidance published by the U.S. Department of Education, Dr. Dupuis found that under ESSA guidelines, there is strong evidence for the positive impact of Read Naturally strategy programs on reading fluency, moderate evidence of positive impact on general reading ability, and promising evidence for the impacts on reading comprehension. This and more can be found under the Research tab in the top navigation of our website. With only 40 to 60% of students reading proficiently in the United States, depending on the sources you look at, as confirmed again recently with the release of the latest Nation's Report Card for Reading, most educational systems are struggling to provide intervention to every learner who indicates he or she needs it. Given this reality, it's imperative that the interventions being used are as effective and efficient as possible and structured to serve as many learners as possible while maintaining both effectiveness and the ability to customize instruction. As you can see in this table, all Read Naturally programs are designed for targeted use as Tier 2 interventions. While all programs may be used within Tier 3 settings as well, some programs provide added benefits from direct instruction and increased feedback when implemented more intensively with fewer students. Finally, while I did not select the Tier 1 boxes, most programs could be utilized effectively within the regular classroom if used as stations, as part of small group instruction, or with the support of additional adults, whether staff or trained volunteers. This slide and the next summarize our many available programs. Read Naturally programs can be used with learners from emerging readers through adulthood. Content grade levels represented here are the grade level equivalents of the content within the programs, not the ages of learners for whom it's appropriate. For more information on the typical grades with which each program is used for intervention, I invite you to view content on our website. Each program is available in one or more of the following formats: print with audio CDs, cloud-based software which works on PC, Mac, or Chromebook, or iPad apps. These many options ensure an intervention solution is available for your unique setting. Finally, these tables show the focus of each intervention in solid dots. Read Naturally does not believe that one-size-fits-all interventions provide the most efficient and effective use of precious learning time. An intervention designed to do everything for everybody will likely lead to some growth over time. However, it's far less likely to accelerate growth sufficiently to truly close the gaps. When learners are spending time practicing skills they already have, they're losing precious instructional time. While every Read Naturally program has one or more areas that are the primary areas of instructional focus, All programs also have secondary benefits or support in one or more areas noted by the circle icons. As I show the second table, let me also share that at the top of each table you see that our intervention options are designed either as adult-assisted independent practice or for direct instruction. Unlike other intervention options, we believe strongly that educators need to be part of the intervention process. All programs expect that teachers will sit with learners to conference, to teach, and to progress monitor and adjust. This ensures that the expert in the room always has his or her hand on the pulse of each learner's progress and can utilize the many customizable features of the programs to tailor to each learner's needs. Our direct instruction programs are intended for teacher-led small group or tutoring implementation. Note that while it can be used as independent reading practice within the classroom, our 1-minute reader program is also ideal for school-to-home connections, offering parents and educators seeking out-of-school time reinforcement an easy-to-implement extension to school-based reading interventions. Some of the broad benefits of Read Naturally intervention programs include targeted practice using standards-aligned materials to build phonemic awareness, phonics, fluency, vocabulary, comprehension, spelling, and English development. Through universal screening, MTSS teams can select an intervention specifically targeted to those areas in which learners are behind. Our programs provide highly interactive, technology-enhanced content with many ways to customize the program to meet differentiated learner needs. The high-interest informational texts and built-in corrective feedback motivate learners, increasing their time on task, while progress graphs or computer-generated reports facilitate database decisions, progress monitoring, and adjustment over time. Finally, our programs keep educators in the driver's seat. Educators know learners and families and are best placed to monitor and make decisions. Teachers play integral roles in the implementation and monitoring of these evidence and research-based programs. I'd like to highlight program features that support the use of an MTSS framework. Programs provide the data educators and MTSS teams need to make decisions about the assignment and adjustment of interventions. This includes effort data in the form of the number of stories completed and the number of modeled read-alongs and independent practices required before passing a story. Outcome data, including accuracy, rate, expression, and comprehension. And finally, trend data, including the goal targets met and performance improvement trends over time. Available data are perfectly suited for use as long-term and shorter-term IEP goals or for monitoring programs targeting reading intervention, such as Title, ESL, migrant education, summer school, or many other programs. These many data types support adults to make a variety of important decisions. These include conducting and checking initial placement into a program, customizing supports and adjusting rigor based on real-time data, conferencing with learners about their progress to maintain motivation and provide just-in-time mini-lessons to increase their reading skills, progress monitoring to ensure desired learner outcomes, and finally, documentation and reporting for the purposes of program evaluation, accountability, professional learning, and communication and collaboration with colleagues and families. Speaking of professional development, in addition to the built-in features and evidence-based practices present in Read Naturally programs, we're committed to supporting leaders and educators in the successful implementation and use of programs. There are many free online resources, including guides, an online Read Live course, teacher and student training videos, webinars, and more. We also offer a variety of in-person training options that include within-district trainings, regional training seminars, remote coaching services, and a host of available Read Naturally staff always happy to answer questions and troubleshoot issues, whether new or seasoned users of the program. I'd like to thank you for spending time with this presentation on 5 essential components of a multi-tiered system of supports for reading. If you have questions on any of the content in this presentation, please write to me and I'll be happy to follow up with you. Our 2020 program catalog is now out as pictured here, and you will find it and a host of information and resources on our website at readnaturally.com. If you should have questions about any of our programs or might be interested in a free trial or a program pilot, Our customer service staff are available 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. Central Time and would be delighted to speak with you. If you're a current user of the Read Naturally program and would like coaching or training support, please contact my colleague, Ben Weisner. Thank you for all that you're doing to support learners young and old to develop into their full potentials as readers and writers. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Ben.
Thank you, Corey. That was very useful information. I hope everyone got a lot out of our short 30-minute presentation. Thank you for attending the webinar this morning. Another reminder that we will be sending out follow-up emails with links to the recording in about 24 hours. So please look for that in your inbox. Feel free to share the recording with anyone at your school or district. We'll also be following up with those of you who have submitted questions as soon as we can. And finally, if you could, please respond to the survey that will appear on your screen as you exit the webinar so we can continue to improve this educational experience for all of you in the future. Thanks again and have a wonderful day.